We have three wonderful people joining us here today. We have Jenny, Jill, and Mike. And we will just have you guys introduce yourself to the group here. And you can just share where you started and, some highlights of your career, where you're at today. You're welcome to share how we met and crossed paths, especially around the Strengths Finder stuff. So let's just see who I pull up first over here. Jill.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, my name is Jill Farias, and I am currently working in HR compliance, something that I never would have guessed I would have worked in, say, 10 years ago. I actually originally took the Strength Finders back in 2015 when I was working at HP. It was part of the, it was through a group kind of thing where they wanted us to all take it and find out where we fell within everything. And so that was the first time I'd really gotten an idea of what my top strengths were. And when I look back at my career thus far, those strengths, some of them I've been able to highlight those strengths, and others I have not. My background is actually, my master's degree is in public administration, and I went to go work for the government as both a federal background investigator and then as an adjudicator. So I was really able to focus on the input and the analytical part of it. And then when I went to the private sector, I was doing the same type of thing at HP before I moved on to Citi, where I realized shortly after I started there that the role I was in there did not meet any of my strengths whatsoever. And so that really led me to understand that I needed to find find a role that really helped me utilize my strengths, but also helped me build up other strengths as well. So I actually left that job at Citi last fall, and now I'm working, as I said, in HR compliance. And I'm doing exactly what I would love to do. And it does combine all of my top 5 strengths.
Yeah. And your strengths are so interesting because, you have these really detailed, input, focus, analytical strengths, which really lend to the process improvement, to the research side, to the quality assurance side. But then you also have futuristic, which is really big picture and it's thought process, what's the dream? What could things be in 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now? And being able to set that direction for yourself and for others, as well as the learner, which is the curious part of your personality. It's also got continuous improvement, a lot like focus does as well. And it's the more experimental part of your personality. So yeah, you have this really interesting mix of big picture, dreamy, visual, creative, and then you have these really stringent, input, research, data-driven, analytical, efficiency-driven strengths as well. So it's an interesting mix, and I know that that's been hard to figure out, where do I belong? Where do I get to do something where I get to use both at the same time?
Yes.
Any questions for Jill? Not yet. Okay.
Just listening.
Yeah.
Sounds
good.
I have a quick question for Jill.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind going back to her other screen. Thanks. Yeah. Well, so I'm wondering, how do you balance that futuristic piece with all that focus and analytics? To me, they seem to be a little juxtaposed. So help me understand how those come together.
Believe me, that's where my difficulty has been as well, because I realized, especially with my previous role, it was more of a project management role, and I did not like it at all. As Brandy was saying, I love the big picture, the building toward the future, but for me to get to the steps from point A to point B, that's where I get lost. I am much more of do these 3 things, do this and that, and I have a hard time managing a long-term project versus I'm much more transactional. And so that has been definitely one of the things that I have been working on the most, is that, you know, I can focus on 1 or 2 or 3 things and I do it well, and they're transactional. But for me to be able to, okay, I have this great idea that's, you know, by the end of this year, we'll be doing this. But for me to find all those steps to get from there, that's really where I struggle the most.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And so you're saying you can see where we need to go. Is that right?
Yes.
You feel like you can see that?
Yes.
And you can maybe communicate that, but you're not necessarily the one to set up all the stuff in between. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the biggest struggle in my previous role, because it was more higher level. It was at the program level versus understanding the day-to-day of what the people who are down in the weeds are doing. I want to be more down in the weeds versus at the program level. I'm transactional.
Yeah.
And it's
been
a real learning experience.
I also want to point this out, because this is interesting with your profile, is that when we think about what is it that you see the future of, you can really envision what the future of learning looks like. You can really envision what the future of research and gathering information looks like. You maybe are looking at what does the future of the goals look like, or the efficiencies, and what does the future of the analytics look like. So you may be more like, okay, I should be in the investigation world, or the evaluation world, or the quality assurance world, or the AI world, whatever that detailed world is, but then you might be able to help drive more of the vision within that.
Correct. So when you look at this 80-20 here, executing, that's if I'm executing at a high level, if I'm leading something, I've realized from previous things that in volunteer work that I've done, I'm not good at bringing it all together. That's where my biggest struggle is. Whereas I can think and I can do, but executing all those steps in between is where I muddle through.
Let's go to Mike, because he actually has a strength called connectedness. So I think he will have a little bit different perspective on his own. Mike, can you share with the group who you are, where you've been, where you are now, what you're up to?
Sure. And follow what Ginny was asking on. I'm curious about later, if it's common that there's a real tension between the top gifts that people have, where it feels like it's kind of like tugging in the opposite direction. I'd be interested in hearing you talk more about that. I was a software engineer for 31 years, and then a dev leader for about 17 years. And the thing is, the Austin, Texas startup scene was kind of my center of gravity. I was involved in lots of startups. Some of them were big super successes. Some of them were huge face plants, but it was that whole roller coaster thing. The title I wish we had is a lean agile value delivery coach is what I'd like to say for enterprise. And I met Brandy in Sabre Labs, which was sort of the more exploratory, experimental part of Sabre. And one thing the coaches we always interested in is all the Carl Jungian derived personality analysis things, such as Clifton or Myers-Briggs or DCS and others, because it helps teams recognize and appreciate the wiring and the makeup of some of their peers, so they don't take things, internalize it as some sort of, in some non-constructive way, but really realize how they can fit together and work and play together. And so we value that a lot. And I was really blessed by going through this with Brandy. She really kind of introduced the Clifton variation of that. And to me, it seems to be the deepest and richest of all of them. And one of them is the thing I like about it is it really does emphasize the strengths, which is more actionable than just kind of knowing what your quirks are. So I really like that aspect of this.
And so what's interesting about your profile is hearing that you were an engineer, and then looking at all this wonderful relationship building that you have going on.
I should have been in social science or been a pastor or something. I don't know, or a social worker or something.
But one of the things I want you all to know is that I do see a lot of people with connectedness that are engineers. And it's because not only is it the connection from the human standpoint, being able to connect with all walks of life across the world, it's also the ability to architect. It's the ability to see how an individual action or behavior is connecting to the bigger picture. So a lot of people that have connectedness are interested in engineering, architecture, looking at the bigger picture and how everything is tying together in some shape or form. So it's actually not all that rare to see that. But it is more rare to see than the empathy and the includer in an engineer. And Mike, I'm assuming that you have sort of stepped away from the engineering side and more into the coaching aspect of it, after becoming a dev leader, and then into the coaching because you enjoy working with humans,
Right.
Not just machines. Yeah.
Right. What happens, I was always interested in creating things that came alive, but from what you created. But I also got very deeply interested in the process of how we got there and with one another, and the things that tended to hinder success in that. And the way the Myers-Briggs puts it is, with my profile, is that the people are the product. So I just was more interested in how can we foster, cultivate teams, and that's my biggest problem is people overestimate the fungibility of cognitive workers instead of realizing you have to invest and cultivate into them, invest in them not only as individuals but as a collective. And so to get the kind of outcomes you want as a team, instead of just say they know how to spell Java, I have one of those, check. They can do C, cloud this, check. Really want to invest in these teams to become something more.
Yeah, and you've got both of those focuses, the input and the intellection, which is more of the technical part of it, the skill set part of it, but then you've also got the human part of it that you can tell that you care about just from looking at your profile. So out of everything that you've ever done, what has been the most rewarding initiative?
Yes, well, I mean, the most successful one we had was a startup that in Austin that we kind of conquered the world together. And what was more fun than just the success was the experience of doing that with people. Like it was, it's like marketing, sales, and engineering were like a hive mind. We were all like one, and we were just play together. We worked together. It was just such a rush. It was so fun. And experiencing that with these human beings was what was the richest part of it, not just, us trying to be wealthy or anything like that. It was really to accomplish something extremely difficult and challenging and aspirational that really benefited a huge population of people. And that was a lot of fun.
And I want you guys to listen real carefully what he's saying there, because that's all connectedness. When you really care about community and collaboration and working together as one to produce something, that when people are talking about that's that connectedness coming through. His is probably even a little bit intensified because he's got this includer, which means he wants everyone to be a part of that, or at least to be able to be a part of that, have the opportunity to be a part of that. Okay, thank you, Mike. Jenny, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, could I ask Mike a quick question before we move to me? Yeah. So, yes. So Mike, how do this is all wonderful and I love it. And it's so intense. When I look at this, I'm like, wow, that's so intense, but it makes so much sense if you're going to be doing lean or agile, because that really does take a large group of people to get those things done. But I'm wondering, how do you make sure things get finished?
Well, stop starting, start finishing is one of our mottos. So yeah, actually, that was an area that I had to grow in personally, and I think this continuously learning thing is something for all of us. That's kind of, we have to break things into small batches, and we have to finish the small batches before So one thing we do for flow is try to focus on small batch sizes, and it actually changed. It's actually been changing the way later in my life I do some basic rubrics of life, like how I put my shoes on and things like that. There's some things like the old thing of the trope of the secretary who is, if he's putting letters in an envelope, all the way across first, or does he seal it, completely stamp it and get all ready and then go to the next one? And there's actually scientific proof that you're actually much better off productivity wise, and especially with risk of rework, if you just finish things rather than always thinking assembly line is better. So anyway, learning to finish your focused small task objectives is kind of a life skill, professionally and personally, that I'm learning. I'm getting better at. So
thank you.
Sure.
Did you know that I wrote an article on that after taking your session?
No, did you? Wow.
Yeah, I'm going to show you. It's out here on LinkedIn. So if you guys go to my activity, sorry, LinkedIn is slow.
I was a big Brandy fan. She was such a gifted person working in that creative group. And
yeah, what I really wanted to do is come over to your team and be a part of the center of excellence and help.
I wish you did. I wish you still can.
I think I called it switchbacks are beautifully inefficient. And look,
wow.
I even mention you right here.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and then I diagrammed out the different ones that we did and how much time it took to do each exercise when you're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then I diagrammed out how efficient it was to do it the other way that you had us do it, which was to just start and stop, finish something, and then hand it back. And so
yes, the example, the people, when they really think about it, it makes more sense. But everything's pulling you to do the other. I'm so impressed. I got to go look at all this. But it's like going to Starbucks, and the people have this wrong Taylorism thought of efficiency. They'll end up saying, well, what if you went to Starbucks and you just got one squirt in your coffee cup and then had to go back to the line and the next squirt, and because you want to show everybody that you're working on their stuff.
That's right.
And the customer satisfaction goes to the basement. It's terrible. Instead of the sense of just happy customer, get it done, and people move forward and they get a real sense of how long it's going to take, and everybody leaves happy. You can't decide when you're going to get your coffee when it does it. You do it the other way. No one knows when they're actually going to get anything when you do it the other way. Anyway.
And the developer was happier too. The person doing the
morale is higher from the providers and the receivers.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. Okay.
I'm so proud of you. That's good. Good.
Yeah, so my name's Jenny, and I have been in the talent world for my career. Although the first 10 years of my career, I was working for telecommunications companies, and I was the liaison between the customer and the programmers to try and, relate and bring our product to some understanding with our customers. And then I decided I wanted to follow my initial dreams of psychology, which I had a BA in psychology, and decided to go into advanced training. Popped out the other end 7 years later as a psychotherapist. And so I learned the clinical side, and I did that for 3 years and then just absolutely hated it. And it's not like, I got there without knowing what I was doing, right? I mean, you go through thousands of hours of counseling people before they let you out on your own. So there's no secrets, but I just didn't like it. And so I decided to get a job at a management consulting firm that did IO, industrial organizational psychology. So it's called IO psychology for short. And I had taken some IO psych classes during my clinical work. So you could see that there was a little bit of tension or confusion with me as I was going through my own training. Even my dissertation is called Lifestyles of Women Who Emerge as Leaders in Small Group Settings. Well, that's not really, like what's happening on depression or anxiety or family issues or things like that. It had nothing to do with it. So I went to work for this IO psych firm, and they taught me all of the IO psych side. And they really needed somebody to come in and run the business side, be present with executives, coach executives, and consult over all sorts of talent issues in organizations. So that's what I did. And I did that for 10 years. And then one of my clients asked me to come on board and help him set up a whole end-to-end process of talent management. So it was really strategic. All of his HR folks were very tactical, and he was having difficulty having a higher level conversation about the talent as a whole. And so I came in we had worked together before. He was one of my clients. And so I came in, and that's what I did for him for 13 years, and set that up and got everything integrated and running smoothly. And then that company was split into 2 public companies over time, and most of the executives were no longer needed. Their services were no longer needed. So I have been now consulting on my own again for the last 2.5 years. And one of the things that I had done is I went to business navigators, executives in transition meetings, and did that for about 6 months. And then I was asked to lead the group. And so I did that for a year, and then recently turned it over to someone else, Tad Summerfield, who is on this call if he's listening, and he's now running it. And that's where I met Brandy. And hi, Tad. And so we also invited Brandy to that process. Meanwhile, Brandy talked about doing strengths finders, the CliftonStrengths assessment. And I'm an assessment guru. I've done a lot of assessments. I know a lot. I'm certified in a lot, both predictives and work styles. And so I had taken it before, gotten feedback on my strengths, really never understood it, never really got the value. But when Brandy debriefed it for me and gave me access to her website to see everything and how it's put together, it made a lot more sense to me and really drove things home. So Brandy, I'll stop there and you can guide me to the next direction.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. You guys can see that Jenny has a lot of strengths in the thinking domain, and hers are very, very academic with input learner and intellection. It drives her to this higher education that she's gotten. You see that a lot when people have all 3 like that. And then she also has that really detailed analytical, asking that who, what, where, when, why, how. But then again, this interesting connectedness, which is more spiritual in nature versus the logical with the analytical, and putting together all the pieces and seeing how we're all connected, and, seeing how we're all important to this bigger this huge picture or globe that we all live in, plus all the stars, plus all the other planets. Like, people with connectedness are thinking about how everything is connected tangibly, but also through energy and also spiritually. So they get into a lot of different studies throughout their lifetime. I'm sure that Mike can also relate to that. Do you guys have questions for Ginny?
Well, I just wanted to say that I find it fascinating that you are in IO Psych, because I had actually really considered for a few years getting my PhD in IO Psych. And so I considered it for a long time. And then, you know, things kind of moved along in my career, but it's definitely something that I had considered for a while. So just want to bring that up.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I could see that for you too, Jill, when you were talking and talking about where you've landed, because
Mhm.
IO Psych has a lot of structure to it,
Yes.
right? There's a lot of process that you follow, and
Mhm.
so there's a methodology, and it's much similar to Mike as well. There's a methodology that you follow and processes that are consistent, but what changes are the goals and the people and the milestones and the exchanges and how you get there. So, you know, I really like messy things. I don't like things that just need a small little tweak. I want something really messy that I can come in and get my teeth around and just learn and absorb and research and figure it out, because I'm really good at figuring things out and solving a problem and then getting people engaged,
Mhm.
pull them in, put them in the right spot, and get them working the problem so I can then step back and go to the next thing.
My question for her then is, if she is, it sounds like there's so much of it is intellectual and very, very high level. And then with the connectedness though, and when you said the sun and the moon and the stars, Brandy, it was made me think about faith. Like, is that a big, is it like a conflict, or is it like a friend, you know, like with that element? Because it's like, it's kind of like spiritual, such so that it's, you know, not controllable.
Yeah, it always has. I think over my lifetime, it has become something that I've integrated and found a way to do that and learned more and more about what does that mean for me, like all these connections I make. I tend to use my left brain in all of these connections, like,
Sure.
you know, why did I run into that person, and how did that person bring value to me, and how did I bring value to them, and how does that spread, and where else can we connect people in to get that message, who needs to hear that message. And so I think about why we're here and why we happen to be put together at the time that we're put together, and what drives that. And so, yes, there is a little bit of a conflict, but I use a very left brain in that. Now, there are parts of me, I have to admit, as a psychologist, you know, I'm a scientist. So
Right.
you've got that, right? The input, the learner, the intellectual. I'm a scientist. But there's a side of me that has been exploring a lot of spirituality and a lot of metaphysics, not religion. You know, I would not call, you know, I think religion's great, but I don't see where one's any better than the other. They all seem like parallel to me. So, you know, that's that sort of global piece. They're all the same. We're all the same. We're all one. We're all one. And so, you know, it brings me personal peace, but I don't talk about it a lot. I use it in my methodologies. Don't get me wrong. I'm using it, but I don't talk about it unless I find somebody else who's equally steeped in those thoughts, because it starts to make me not look like a scientist in my brain.
So Mike, can I rope you into this conversation? Because, you know,
Just
you and
here to see
Ginny
if it's been naughty
look,
or nice.
sorry?
I'm just here to see if it's been naughty or nice. I'm not, that's all I'm reasoning. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you look, you know, similar to Ginny, but you guys have one huge difference, which is you have empathy at number 2, while she has the analytical. And, you know, if we look down to y'all's bottom, your analytical is much lower, her empathy is much lower. So that is one of the opposites, although you guys have, you know, this connectedness, this input, this intellection. So I'd love to hear how you think about these types of things, or like what types of things your brain is connecting? Because I think you have a similar connectedness pattern that Jenny has, but I think it's kind of of different things. Would you agree with that?
Sure. I mean, I can see, I don't have probably the intellectual strengths that either of these ladies have, to the depth or degree that they have. I'm intense. I'm very, we have this, it's what the fathers called logos me. It's that voice that never stops. Anyway, there's this conversation that never ends in your head, right? It's but the connectedness is frenetic. It's just intense. It is about everything connecting. But and that kind of feeds into input. You're just voraciously hungry to learn everything you can to so you can connect some dots, right? So you're just wanting to gather, connect, synthesize. And so this is happening when people think you're at rest and sitting on the sofa in total seeming docile. You're just going. And another thing is another trope is about the husbands that aren't listening to their spouses. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes what's happening, if you're a connected type person, is the first thing they say, since you care so deeply about them, sends you off on a cascade of deep thought about what they said, because you care about them, you care about what they said, and you can't continue to take input. So the input may continue for a few sentences before you realize, wait a minute, I'm still processing what you first said. So anyways, in our defense, right? Right. Well,
and I think that's actually a trait of intellection, because I'm pretty sure Jenny's over there laughing because she does that. I know I do it. I have intellection at number 7, and I can only take so much information in from somebody because I am actually thinking about what they said and mulling it over and, pulling pieces together and, whatnot. So if they're just like berating me with a lot of things, I'm just like, you're going to have to hold on for a second and let me finish the thought over here on this before I can come back over here with you.
And on the other thing, I kind of agree with Ginny about, so I have a deep respect about all the different faith traditions, and and I'm always deeply interested, and I have I find a lot of resonance with a lot of things in Buddhism, but I am a Christian. And one of the things that is in my tradition, Eastern Orthodox Christian faith, is that everybody's sacred. In other words, there's just this incredible holiness with every human. In other words, and there's always this sense, which different people have different cosmologies about how they imagine, or is that everybody is for eternal. So since everyone is eternal, no one is trivial. I mean, even the person that you wish would go away and just stop existing sometimes, sinfully, if you accept or acknowledge or confess that, they're going to be around for millions and millions of years in a very special state. That's kind of this. But anyway, the point is that it makes you elevate everyone to a level of sacred value. There's nothing discardable. There's nothing, even if people have a lot of growing to do, or they're very broken, or I like Ginny's comment. I said, the messier it is, the better. It doesn't make them any less sacred. So that's one part of the faith aspect of this. Is I really try to, just love everybody, despite my lack of virtue. I like to. So that is a part of it.
Yeah, and I can hear your deep compassion and care for humans, which I think is not just attributed to the connectedness, but also to the high empathy and high includer.
Yeah, I can hear that empathy there, which is not me. I'm the analytical. So, I'm looking at it from the logical standpoint, or trying to anyway. But, for me, I think the part of the intellection is because I'm taking so much input in and I'm trying to learn as much as I can, I research until there's no more research available. You know, I've hit the bottom of the barrel. Nothing else is contributing. And I get so much of that. And then my connectedness goes, oh, well, this was that, and this is that, and this is that. And so I've got these stream of thoughts that they're all connected. I got to go write them all down. And then I come up with, especially like in a meeting of a lot of people, I'm listening to everything and I'm connecting all these dots. And I'm thinking, don't they see the connection? I know they don't. I see the connection. And so then I go, okay, now that all the information's out on the table, let me offer a thought. And I'll put something out there. And it's usually a very profound thought that nobody has thought of, because I'm the one who has done the research and has come back and put all the pieces together for them.
I want to share something for Ginny, and I think probably Jill would like this too, but this is something that has been around for a while, but it's gotten more popular recently. You've probably heard about it. It's called Zettelkasten, and it's a slip box. And it's basically, like Feinstein and these people who Nobel Prize winning physicists, they basically said none of these people have this all in their head. They all have had a certain way of externalizing what they're learning and take, especially if you're an input person, a learner person, an analytics person, a connected person. This gives you a technique that's been proven. It's incredibly powerful. A lot of the most prolific authors and academics use this technique, and it creates this integrated cross-reference between all these things you're organically bringing in as you're researching, and it organizes and lets you kind of reconnect and see unanticipated correlations between things, and then start forming kind of insights the way Jill just described, but it's a tool to amplify that and help that. So that's something to kind of go offline and look into. It's called Zettelkasten or Slipbox. And one of the free tools for that is called Obsidian. So that's my 2 cents. I'm sorry, Brandy.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mike. So Jill, with your focus strength glaring at us across profiles, can you tell us a little bit about what focus is and how it manifests for you?
Yes, focus can be good and bad, because I can be so focused on a topic that I have a hard time, looking elsewhere, or, I love to learn and I'm always gathering data, and you start getting that tunnel vision that sometimes you have a hard time looking elsewhere. But I did want to say the whole empathy thing. I would love to know how far down empathy is on my list, because clearly I can't see it. And down at number 22, it kind of reminds me of, so my previous jobs and even now in HR compliance, I've been a background investigator and I've been a personnel security specialist. I've actually granted eligibility for security clearances for people in the government. And so with that being said, I've always had to bring all the data together and make a determination using what we call the whole person concept, not just looking at one isolated incident in a person's past, but everything over the last 7, 10 years or whatever. And so I really couldn't bring the empathy in there, because yes, I might feel bad, but at the same time, I have to use the same criteria for everybody. You can't have a different criteria for this person versus that person. So if you had criminal conduct in the last 7 years and it was this or that, and there's certain things like the government has specific guidelines. And so if it falls under there as a disqualifier, well, I'm going to say that the person's not eligible, or the person can't do this or that. And so for me, I've always, in my jobs, I've had to take out that empathy part of it, because of the fact that it has to be very straightforward.
And also,
so I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Maybe you were attracted to that role or those positions or that job because you didn't have to have a large amount of empathy, or even not having a large amount of empathy is helpful in that role. I think sometimes we sort of flip it from the way it is, right? We'll say, well, this situation requires this, so I didn't have to do this. But what the reality is that you're built a certain way. And because you're built a certain way, you are attracted and drawn to certain things. So I do wonder if you were drawn or attracted to that role because you knew that, you almost have to have, let's say, a lack of empathy. And empathy doesn't mean you don't care, right, Jill? You care.
Yeah.
You've got relator, you care about humans very much.
Yeah.
But it's more of, I don't feel the things that would make me feel bad about the situation, where an empathy person is deeply in tune and in touch to the feelings that are associated with that, and would be taking that home with them at night, which is a heavy burden. So they might not want to be in a situation where there's a lot of sadness, or there's a lot of just a lot of really, nasty bad things going on, because they'll take those feelings home with them potentially, not all the time, but sometimes. Yeah.
And also I was gonna say about the connectedness, which is also, I have number 17 on there. One thing I've had to do over the years is kind of learn how to compartmentalize with my life. It makes it easier to be compartmentalized versus, there might be some connection there, but if I don't compartmentalize, I'm not gonna be able to function.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I had to do after my son was diagnosed with autism. It was like, okay, there's this and there's this, you just kind of have to you have to function here, and I have to go function at work, but I can't connect them, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to survive.
Well, and also I think that in Jenny and Michael's state, they would have to connect that to survive. But for you, because you have focus, it's easier for you to chunk things into tangible, tactical goals that you can focus on and achieve. And then you do another one. You focus on a goal that you can tackle and achieve, and you have to chunk it in order to use your focus, right? That's what focus does. It just focuses in on one thing and gets it done. So if you're trying to spread yourself across your focus across all these different things, you're going to feel completely vulnerable, anxiety, overwhelmed, and just like, I'm not getting anything done, which is very important for focus. And so in order with your own wiring and your own personality to cope well with that, you said, I just need to chunk it. And when I'm here, I address this and I do this. When I'm over here, I address this and I do this. And I'm wired very similar to that. My connectedness is 34 and I have discipline and focus and all these other lovely things up top. But it doesn't allow me to do what these guys do and see that full picture and see how everything is innately connected. Intuitively, but rather I just focus on chunks of things and go through them as fast as I can to get a lot of execution done.
And you're an achiever too, right, Brandy?
Oh yeah. So my profile looks absolutely completely different than y'all's. I have all this purple up top, a little bit of green, a little bit of blue, but mostly purple. Yeah.
Can I tell one about focus? Oh, go ahead, Ginny.
I was just gonna say, it's good to know who to call in when you need something executed.
Yeah, but it's funny though, because I'll tell people when I first start working with them, I'm like, I'm a bulldozer, and I don't mean to be. I just execute really hardcore, really fast, a lot. I'm like, so if I'm going too hard or too fast or too much, or I'm stepping all over something, just tell me, and I'll just pull back. I just, my go-to is just to go as hard and as fast as I can.
I find it a challenge. It makes it interesting.
To keep up, is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Hang on, it's a wild ride.
That's a leader. She's going to lead the pack. May I tell one anecdote about Ginny's focus, strengths real quick?
Jill's focus?
Jill, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Jill's focus. When I was with that company I was telling you about, the undisputed superstar creator and developer and engineer, the force of nature, was this one fellow. And one time I went to talk to him about an engineering problem, and he looked at it and pretty quickly solved it. And I said, well, maybe if I was as smart as you, I would have worked that out. And he said, Strong, you're smarter than I am. And that shocked me, because he said he was kind of a little guy, and he had a little guy compensation complex. He strutted like a rooster. Anyway, he was very loved, but he was very, very about self-promotion in a comical way. And he said, yeah, you're smarter than me. And I couldn't understand why he would be saying anything like that, just out of his persona. That wasn't. And then he said, but I can outfocus your ass any day of the week. his whole superpower that he leveraged was Jill's focus. You know, he just completely got in the zone and focused more than anybody, and really got so much more accomplished than any of us did.
Yeah, it's interesting that he knew that, and that he knew how to leverage that. And also it sounds like he knew how to put himself in the right environment, you know, to be able to use and leverage that for him, you know, so that he could be successful. Because if we put ourselves in an environment that doesn't allow us to use all of our wonderful strengths all the time, we're not setting ourselves up for success. So for example, if we asked Jenny to be in a sales and marketing role, she could do it, but she might not be very happy, and she might not be getting to use her strengths. Where, you know, if I'm asking Jenny to be in a, you know, and more of a academic role of, I need you to become the expert on this, and then I need you to be able to share your wisdom with us. She's going to be highly successful there, because she gets to go be a sponge and learn everything, and then bring it all back and connect all the dots, right? And then bring it all back for us after she's put all the pieces together. So I think it's really interesting that that guy seemed to know what his strength was, and then also how to leverage it and to produce a result out of it that helped him be successful at wherever you guys were. Any questions from the rest of the crowd for Ginny, Jill, and Mike?
I was going to say that I see individualization for all three of them is right near 9 and 10.
Mm-hmm.
And does that, I see three different kinds of people here. So for them to have that similarity, I wonder how it plays out with each one, because when y'all were talking about connectedness, and when you have high on connectedness and everything has to be connected, you can't ever get anything done because it's all sticking to something else, you know.
Well,
but individualization is, you know, thinking about people as individuals.
I was curious for my connection. You notice my self-assurance is 34.
Okay.
And one reason is actually show a lot of confidence. People say that's so odd. I would think you're a lot more self-assured, but what it is self-assurance about, I see everything from so many different angles.
Yes.
I never feel confident that I can tell you this is what you ought to go do.
And I want to show you that, because you just brought up an amazing point. Hold on, reset. And okay. So self-assurance and intellection are rarely paired together in a person's top 5. Only 2 people in my entire database have that combination, Mike. And they are complete opposites. So where Ginny has them a little bit closer is more rare. And it's exactly what you're saying. When an intellect is going, well, it could be this. Well, it could be this. But if it's like this, it could be this. And then if it's like, because they're considering every single perspective.
Exactly.
Where self-assurance is like, I have this inner guide. I know what we need to be doing. I know where we need to go. And this is what we're going to be doing. And it's a very secure, confident, assured. Whoever's got the phone, if you could please mute.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You know, then you know, they're very confident in the direction. And if they become unconfident, they quickly do everything that they need to do in their power in order to become confident again, because they don't like feeling not confident. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But it's extremely rare to have those two paired together in the top 5. Like Jenny has them a little bit closer here. She has self-assurance and intellect right up here. So that's something that she can leverage, because there's not very many self-assured, confident intellects, for example. Usually the intellects are questioning things a little bit more, because they are looking at it from all the different angles, and they would never feel like one direction is correct or right. Or
another hazard of the empathy is that people can feel you're duplicitous, because you actually can see different people's, how you can see why they feel the way they feel. And if you have 2 people you love or you care about, and they're on some polar opposite, they want you to take sides. They don't want you to be Switzerland.
Mhm.
And so what you're saying is, yeah, but you see, I understand that they're, here's where they're coming from, and here's where they're coming from.
Yeah,
So
I've
it's
experienced that
not
too.
always a peacemaker leverage. Go ahead.
No, I've experienced that too, where someone wanted me to take sides, and it just wasn't, that's not how I show my love, right? It's
Right,
like,
right.
that's not a sign of loyalty to me. Like, to be,
Yeah.
to me, to almost be not intelligent, uh to be loyal is not, it's not the way I operate. It's like, no, it doesn't mean that somebody was right or wrong, but just, I can see the perspective. I can see why they did what they did.
You may not excuse it, but you can just see you can
Exactly.
see what's going on in their heart and mind. And you may not, the behavior may need to be challenged, but you don't write them off.
And I can
And
see why the other person is going to write them off too. And that's okay.
especially if they're hyper threatened by
You know,
some insecurity or vulnerability they have.
sure.
Which makes
Exactly.
me empathetic with them,
Exactly.
Well, and then if I could take this to David's question of the individualization, because I think there's a little bit of a parallel there, which is, that is focusing on what makes people unique and different,
Mhm.
and then working with them to help them bring forth those strengths. So, for people who are working in groups and teams and have to use talent to get things done, I think that individuation has to come in there in the top 10, probably at least, to be able to put a team together,
Yes.
and understand the unique pieces and what everybody brings, so that you bring the right people to the table to get things moving. So that's sort of where I go with that. And when I look at all three of us and then say, okay, wow, it's all in 9 and 10, it's probably because we do that. And it's part of who we are, and we do it naturally and every day, but it's not like such a driver that it's the first thing we do. It's more of, okay, we're going to set what needs to be done and get all the systems and the frameworks in place. Then we're going to look at the talent and figure out how the talent plays into this. That's one of the things that I see.
Mhm.
That resonates.
Anybody else have questions for the three guests today? Do you guys want to look towards the bottom a little bit? I know you like
Yeah.
seeing what's down here. We can obviously see Mike's relationship building is high because he has hardly any of the blues down here in the bottom, where both Jill and Ginny have more of the blue, a little bit of orange, a little bit of purple, none of the greens. I mean, Ginny has context, but the rest, all the greens are pushed up for both of these ladies.
Yeah. So when I look at this, I'm just looking at mine in particular. When I look at woo in particular, oh my gosh, woo is really hard for me.
Yeah.
And that's something that Mike has right at number 6.
Yeah. I hear the empathy, and I could hear how I could envision how he would then use his woo to influence people and get and try and get them pulled in. But that pulling in, to me, feels invasive to me sometimes, as much as I'm connected and I am, I'm connecting thoughts, and I'm connecting the people, and I'm connecting with the heart. That wooer, for some reason, really bothers me. It feels intrusive. It feels it feels a little fake.
Right. Or manipulative. Potentially.
Yeah. And even if they're not being manipulative, it feels like they're trying to be manipulative when they're really not.
Well,
but
none of
that's
us
been
none of us
sorry.
None of us want someone coming to our front door and trying to woo us into solar panels. I mean, the thing is, so I think what happens is when you feel sincere, I don't know if y'all get 4 of those a week, or if it's just us, but when you feel sincere about wanting to be inclusive and you try to woo in a way, I think as you get older and older, you try to find ways so that it's not as whatever you do is not off-putting, or it's not triggering, but you have to attenuate it to where it's just right to try to open someone's mind to the possibility of doing something and being part of something.
And I think it's really fun to hear you guys talk about this, because you know, woo combined with all your other sincere, lovely, you know, relationship building strengths, it doesn't come off as invasive. And then when we do feel woo come off as, let's say, invasive, a lot of times it's just a younger woo. As woos get older and they learn how to woo you for real, they get more sophisticated in their wooing, and it actually feels quite good. And yeah. Yeah. So sometimes it's also a maturity factor that we're, you know, of the person really trying to just develop their woo factor.
Isn't that true of all of our gifts? I mean, all of our
Yes,
gifts probably
right.
like
I call it the woo curse. Because it's like, I'm like number 3 on woo, and it's just like, oh, you know, but I have a way to think about it. If you go to your friend's house and they have a young puppy or a dog, and it wants to kind of run up on you and lick you and jump up on you and like get your attention, that's woo, you know. But you don't think about the dog as like, oh my gosh, look how intrusive, you know. You just know it's in his nature. I forgive. You know?
There's an innocence that's authentic.
Yeah, that's the way.
Authenticity is built in. Yeah,
right. We're not trying to be manipulative.
Dave, that if we don't want to get licked, we should stay away from you.
Right, or you know, whatever, you know, owling or something like that. But
So,
I have one question for Ginny.
And can I point out one thing really quickly?
Yeah.
I want you guys to see that competition is really low for all of you. So none of you are overly competitive trying to compete or win or beat other people. And that's very common when the connectedness strength is higher than the competition. What was your question, David?
Oh, it was to Ginny, is because I saw her woo was low and empathy was low. But if there's a family dynamic or something, you know, where it's not business, but there's personalities which you can see that are kind of broken, you know, because you're trying to fix messes, right? And does that cause any kind of like problems in the holidays or something where, you know, people sometimes they share and stuff like that, and all of a sudden it's like you can see a problem that needs to be fixed, and you could clean them up, you could fix them, you know, and but maybe they aren't ready for the grand fix if there's not enough relator or empathy in there. You just say, you know, you just do, you know, I'm not even saying anything because it might be offensive, but you know, you're just too, you know, friendly with strangers or something like that. I don't, you know, just as you fix somebody, because you have all that, you know, potential right there, and that's that. It's your nature to fix things. It's like the again on the dog thing, but you know, those the ones that are the hound, not the hound dog, but the ones that corral the other sheep, you know, the sheep dogs and stuff like that. They're always corralling, and you know, that's just their nature. So I'm just thinking that's more of this thing that you have this you're always fixing things, you know, because it's just a part of you. So I just wonder if it could get sticky.
I think it's back to the maturity, you know, of when I was younger and more green at what I do and leveraging my best strengths. Is I wanted to do it all the time and thought everybody wanted to be fixed, but I realized not everybody wants to be fixed, and for family dynamics it's not appropriate. So, you know, I think the good news is, because my empathy is low, I can listen to their problems and just say, well, how are you going to fix it? Or do you even want to fix it? Is it time to fix it? Or do you just want to wait and wallow in it? Or what do you want to do? You know, and I just let them guide it. And I try and step away. And the good news is I don't have a lot of empathy. the good news is for me, the good news is I don't have a lot of empathy. So I don't really care if they fix it or not.
Yeah.
But, the downside is because I don't care whether they fix it or not, they have to come to me and say, I want your advice. I need your help. I need you to fix it for me. Right. And then I will go into it. But it's just similar to any sort of, mentoring or coaching that you do. You always want them to want it. And I had to learn that over time, that I need to wait for them to come to me. But the nice thing is, when they're going through their mess, I have a clear delineation that this has nothing to do with me. And I'm just logically helping somebody else. That's all I'm doing. And so, because it's my daughter, I'm logically working it through. I'm not emotionally invested in too many things. My mother was not empathetic and my father was not empathetic. So I come by low empathy through genetics and early childhood training.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, my parents were part of the silent generation. And so it's very much about you do what you're told and you stay at a job for 30 years and then you retire. Not a lot of empathy. Like, for instance, you think my parents being teachers, that they would have been more involved in my education, but they weren't. Very few times did I see them, really be, emotional with each other, hugs, kisses, or anything else. They were just very much of a hands off. So that's how I was raised. And so, of course, I try to be different with my children because I don't want them to have the hands-off approach that I had. So it's kind of like, I have more empathy than my parents did, but I still am low on empathy at the same time. It's very much, as you said, helping people through the process something so they can come to the conclusion or the determination of what they want to do next, but I'm not going to tell them what to do.
Well,
yeah, because who knows what the world wants for them, right? That's what I think. My connectedness starts popping in and I start to say, I don't know why they're here in this world. I don't know what their journey is. I don't know who they're supposed to impact. So I don't want to interfere too much, right? I want the process to unfold and they become enlightened and others become enlightened in a natural way.
I can't say I've read it yet, but I've heard an abstract of it and it sounded really good. And it's one from the top of my reading list. It's Against Empathy by Paul Bloom. The case for rational compassion. And I think that it's one thing I'm so deeply interested in. I think, Brene Brown and others have done some good, really great things. However, I think sometimes because people kind of get enamored, things swing like a pendulum. It ends up becoming, it should not be confused with virtue. It's just like anything else. It's a thing that can lead to harm if it's not used in a healthy context or in a healthy manner. So I'm really wanting to read Paul's book, Against Empathy, The Case for Rational Compassion.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to close it up, guys. It's been an hour. So thank you so much to all three of you for being here today. I really appreciate your time and your thoughts. This has been very, very informative. And thank you to everyone who was able to join today and listen in.
Thank you,
Mandy.
Thank you.
Bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
See y'all.
Bye.